with that, we talked about some of these really vital individuals to the convention. Obviously, James Madison becomes known as the father. Not sure if I talked with you guys about this. Madison was the most prepared coming into this Constitution. He came with a framework for a new government, and Washington is named the chairman of the convention or the president of the convention. Okay, so this will last 3 months, and they'll be working out the Constitution that we have today. Okay, so this is, why it's important to look back and study it, what they argued about and what they settled on. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide because there's two plans, the Virginia plan, the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. Okay, on the next test, you guys are going to be writing about these two plans and the resulting compromise from these two plans. Okay, and in this discussion, if we look at our government today, okay, this is the things they argued about. Okay, Madison doesn't even introduce this. He has Edmund Randolph introduce it for him, so he can sit back and watch the room, take notes over what is said in the debate over his plan. Okay, this is Madison's handwriting right here. Okay, so he brought this with him to the convention, and so they're going to debate this idea. And what Madison wanted was a strong central government. Okay, remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the central government, the national government, was very small and had very little power. So we're going from this to a federal system, which is going to give the national government more power than it had under the confederal system. Okay, so a strong central government, a bicameral legislature, okay, which is different than what we had, okay, but it's what the British used. It's what most of the colonies used during the colonial era, was a bicameral legislature, and then a strong executive and judiciary. So he's calling for a 3-branch government, okay, a legislature that's bicameral, a strong leader. I don't know what we're going to call them yet. They don't know what they're going to call the executive yet. President, premier, prime minister, king. They don't know what they're going to call it. Okay, and then a judiciary, which is going to help settle disputes between different states, settle disputes between the national government and the states, and so forth. Okay, with this Virginia plan, we start to break down the legislature. Okay, and how they're going to choose this and how they're going to base this, the number of legislatures per state. In the Virginia plan, it's based on population. If you go back to the Articles of Confederation, guys, each state got 1 representative. That's it. So Virginia, which was the largest state, had the same number of representatives as Rhode Island, which might have been the smallest state. Does that make sense? Which really gave the states a lot of power. This is going to give states with larger populations more representatives, okay? And these are your biggest states population-wise at the time: Virginia, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Maryland, and North Carolina. So the people, you and I, would get to choose the first house, okay? Then that house would get to choose nominees that the state puts up for the second house. And then members of the executive and judiciary would be chosen by the legislature. All right, here we go. Here's the question. What system of government is this if the executive is chosen by the legislature? I'm going to try this again. Like you're listening. If the executive is chosen by the legislature, we learned this in the last chapter, what system of government is that?
parliamentary system.
Parliamentary system, okay? Do we have a parliamentary system today? No. So we know that not everything Madison wants, Madison's going to get. So this Virginia plan, we know we have 3 branches today, okay? We know we have a strong executive, a strong judiciary, but Madison's not going to get everything he wants, okay? Because other people have opinions too, all right? Especially some of these small states. They're like, whoa, wait a minute, man. Okay. So, but that's part of the Virginia plan. All right. Now, so when you're writing about this on the test, you're looking for, you don't have to go into incredible detail here, but you need to talk about, this was a bicameral legislature. Okay. 3 branches of government, chosen by, the executive will be chosen by the legislature. Parliamentary system. Now, this national government is going to have more power than it certainly had under the Articles of Confederation. They're going to be able to levy taxes, which I think they all realized that was going to have to happen because the national government's going to need money. Okay. Now this one's going to scare some people. Make laws for the whole nation. Okay. This one is going to bother people. Let's just take an example right now that we're seeing in the United States where this is kind of an issue. Federal marijuana laws, right? Every state has federal marijuana, or the whole country. It's a banned substance. But you have, I don't know how many states now, probably 1/3 of them, that are ignoring federal law, okay, and allowing marijuana, whether it be medical marijuana or just decriminalizing it, like Colorado and some other states. They're flaunting federal law. Guys, this causes conflict between the states and the federal government. States feel like we should be able to make our own decision on marijuana, but it's a federal law. You follow me? And for them, the federal government is not enforcing the law. So is that a good thing when you have the federal government not enforcing law? You have a breakdown in society when they don't enforce the law. So if everybody's going to ignore the law, then get rid of the law and allow states to make the decisions themselves whether they're going to have marijuana or not. You see the difference? So with drinking age, every state has the drinking age. It's not a national law. Okay, so these, when you're trying to write a constitution and think forward 200 years, what are some conflicts that could come up? You start to think about how this could be troublesome, having national laws instead of allowing states to make their laws or local governments to make their laws. Okay, and then regulating trade. That is something that needed to happen that wasn't working well under the Articles of Confederation. Okay. So this is the basics of the Virginia plan. All right. So this is introduced to the 55 delegates. They're going to talk about it. They're going to raise, questions, alarms about it. And then a small state is going to put forth their idea for this new plan of government. And this one, does anybody remember what the other plan was? Virginia and New Jersey. Okay, that might sound familiar. Okay. They were worried that the states were going to lose too much power. Okay. And that the national government was going to become dominant over them. So this is what they come up with in New Jersey. This is actually a guy named William Patterson is the guy that's going to introduce this law or this plan. Okay. They're going to give them the power to tax and regulate trade. What they don't have in there is the national laws. They're worried about the national government making laws. And so they're like, We don't want that. Okay. Now they're going to call for 3 branches as well. Right? Just like the executive, or just like the Virginia plan. But their 3 branches of government are going to look a little different. Okay? They want a unicameral, one-body legislature, where each state gets 1, just like the Articles of Confederation. So what the New Jersey plan is really telling you is that these small states are really fearful of being dominated by the populated states, because they're going to have more representation under the Virginia plan. And these small states are like, dude, we're not going to be dominated by Virginia. We're not going to be dominated by Pennsylvania, New York. That's not what we signed up for. Now, these representatives would not be chosen by the people, but by the state legislature, which also kind of leads to the idea that they don't really trust the people very much. They want the state legislature to make these decisions at the state level, not the people at the local level. And you can understand why they don't trust people, right? People are busy, they're farming, they're working, they don't have time to pay attention to all this stuff. Let's allow elected officials, okay, state legislatures, guys. These are people that live in your neighborhood. You understand? And they go to Topeka for a few months a year in our state legislature. They live in your neighborhood. Okay, so they can better represent you than maybe yourself if you're not paying attention. Right? Do we have people in this country that don't pay attention to what's going on? Yeah. A lot of people don't pay attention to what's going on. So let's let them make the decision. Okay, the people in your neighborhood that do pay attention. Okay? So this is the New Jersey plan. So you got 2 plans on the table. They're going to vote. Okay? You've got 13 states. Okay? And in order to adopt one of these 2 plans, you need 9 of 13 to agree. Okay? So they're going to vote. And here's the vote. On June 19th, they vote, and 7 states vote for the Virginia plan. 2 shy of the 9. 3 vote for the New Jersey plan, and 3 abstain from voting or are split. Get off the fence here. What are these people, moderates or what? Okay. So they're going to have to go back to the drawing table. They're going to have to work out a compromise. All right. So on your long answer here, guys, what are you going to write about the New Jersey plan? Well, they wanted a unicameral legislature where each state got 1 representative. Each state had equal representation, not based on population. Now, that's not very democratic, is it? Okay, and we are a representative democracy. So when they go back to the table in the debate, and this debate will last a whole nother month to figure out a compromise between these 2, okay? Because you have some real fears in here. So the compromise they come up with will become known as, not just any compromise, but the Great Compromise. Okay. And so this you want to include in your long answer, because this is what they settle on, and this is pretty much what we have today. Okay, so this is called the Connecticut plan. So June 16th, a month later after that vote, okay, Connecticut comes up with a compromise. So we're going to have a bicameral legislature. We're going to have 3 branches of government, yes. But the real issue here is over representation in Congress or in the legislative branch. So they set up the House of Representatives, which would be based on population, elected by the people. And then the second body will be called the Senate. Get that from the Romans, okay? The British used the House of Commons and the House of Lords. We're going to use the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay? Each state is going to get 2 senators, and they will be elected by state legislatures. Is this what we have today? No.
The senators are elected by people.
Yeah, you got to vote for Roger Marshall or Barbara Bollier for Senate, right? Not the state legislatures. Okay, so that's one thing that has changed, and that the only way that could be changed is with an amendment to the Constitution, because this is part of the original Constitution. Does anybody know what amendment changed that? There's 27 total. It's not in the first 10 because that's the Bill of Rights. So you got a 1 in 17 chance. So today we have direct election of the senators. And what amendment did that? Any idea? No? Good. You're close though. Go the other way.
17.
Yes. The 17th Amendment. Is direct election of senators by the people. Instead of the state legislature. Would you say that makes us more democratic if the people get to choose the senators rather than the state legislatures? Yeah, it makes us more democratic. Is that a good idea? Okay, raise your hand right now. You can name both senators from the state of Kansas that represent us in Washington, D.C. I just mentioned one of them, but you may not have been listening. So why would we let you choose the senators? Now, do you think the state legislatures in Topeka are legislators there? Do you think they know who our 2 senators are? Of course they do. Why would we take that away from them and give it to the people who don't pay attention? Because it makes us more democratic, and that must be a good thing, right? Because democracy is a wonderful thing. Remember what our founders talked about with democracy. They called it mobocracy. Okay? The people are busy. They got things going on. They don't pay attention to these issues like people that are in government, people that are elected representatives. Okay? I think this was a horrible idea. In fact, I think we should repeal both the 16th and the 17th Amendment. We need to do away with it and go back to what we had. Guys, prior to the 16th Amendment, the federal government taxed the states based on their population. They did not tax you directly. The state of Kansas would tax you, and then the federal government would say to the states, all right, based on how many people you have, this is what your state is going to pay to the national government in taxes. So the people that were taxing you lived in your neighborhood, not in Washington, D.C. You understand? But it makes us more democratic. The federal government comes into your paycheck before you even see the money, before you even receive the money, and they take it out of your paycheck like it was never there. What do they do with our money? Okay, right now in the House of Representatives today, they're going to be debating and trying to pass a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. I think it's called something like Rescue America bill. Okay, Rescue America. I think that's what they're calling it. Okay. Now, we've already done this with COVID, right, a couple of times under Trump, all right? Now we're doing it under Biden. That's going on in the House, okay? Anytime they're going to spend your money, anytime they're going to tax you, that bill has to start in the House, which is closest to the people, okay? Now, I'm part of a group that believes we should repeal it, okay? Now, as we go through this, we're going to learn about how do you amend the Constitution, because they write that in the Constitution, how you amend it, okay? And there's two ways to amend it, okay? Two ways to propose an amendment. All 27 amendments, guys, have been proposed by 2/3 vote in Congress. So one of the things that a lot of people want to see is term limits for members of Congress, right? That they can't stay there for 40 years. Could you ever see Congress imposing term limits on themselves? No, they want to stay in power for as long as they can get reelected. So the Constitution gives us another way to propose an amendment, and that's called through a convention of the states. Okay, this, when we talk about the Constitutional Convention, guys, this is a convention of the states. When they wrote the new Constitution, they got all 13 states together, sent delegates to Philadelphia to propose a new Constitution. This is how you can propose a new amendment. Okay, in this organization, which my wife calls a cult, okay, is a group of people that want to see a state convention, a national convention of the states, to propose new amendments. One of those would be term limits for members of Congress. Okay, right now, we have 14 states that have agreed to do this. You need 34. Kansas has not agreed to this yet. I went to Topeka 2 years ago when this was being debated in the House in Topeka. And I went up there wearing this button to the committee meeting to show my support for Convention of the States. It passed the state House, but failed in the state Senate. Okay? If we got 34 states to agree with this, they could get together, why not do it in Philadelphia, and propose new amendments to the Constitution. This group, although they don't say it out loud because it scares people, many of them want to repeal the 16th and 17th. Okay? And I totally agree with that idea. Okay? We'll see what happens. But term limits is the big one. All right? But let me talk about why. Why, Mr. Ebright, should we repeal these? Why was this bad for America? Okay, now I know this is getting kind of deep into the weeds here. Okay? But when you take away the state's power, that's what we've done here, is we've taken away the power of the states. So when we had state legislatures choosing the senators, obviously the state legislatures knew who those senators were going to Washington. And if those senators did not represent the state of Kansas well, they would not send them back to Washington. When they taxed the states instead of the people, the state legislatures were the ones having to tax you and I. Okay? So when they tax us, they live in our neighborhood, and they're going to hear it from us. Okay? And so when the national government says, hey, we need this much money from your state, the state's going to be like, okay, so where are you spending this money? What are you spending this money on? And the senators, which are chosen by the state legislatures, they're going to have their feet held to the fire by the state legislatures, saying, listen, you guys are spending too much money in Washington, D.C. We're having to tax the hell out of our citizens in our state. But now that relationship is gone. The federal government goes directly into your pocket, and you get to choose the senators. But if you ask the average Kansas what percentage in a non-election year even know who our two senators are and what they're doing. Now, I would say that number's probably around 50, 60% of people that know, adults that know who their two senators. That's not enough. These senators only worry about things in election years. They do whatever the hell they want for the first 4 or 5 years of their term in the Senate, and then in election years, they kowtow to the voter. You know, they try and, you know, say how good of a job they're doing and, you know, say the right things to get reelected. Okay. I think we should repeal this. I think this was bad. Guys, just because it makes us more democratic doesn't mean it's a good thing. Okay. But for simple-minded people, when people say democracy, 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 the people don't understand what true democracy is, that it's dangerous, as the founders believed. And believe me, these people are way smarter than Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. These people are way smarter than they. They're much more well-read. They understand history. It's not even close, people. Okay, so I say stay with what they came up with. Now, we've changed the Constitution 17 times since the Bill of Rights in 230 years. Some of those were necessary, like the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. Okay, we're going to learn all these amendments. Okay, the 14th Amendment had to happen. Okay, after the Civil War. The 13th Amendment, slavery, that had to happen. Okay, we had to write that in, put that in the Constitution. Okay, and the 18th Amendment was a bad one, right? That was prohibition of alcohol. That was a bad idea. So we repealed it after 13 years of prohibition in this country. Okay, from 14 years, from 1919 to 1933, we had prohibition of alcohol. Okay, it took them that long to figure out how dumb of an idea it was. So I don't know. I took some time on that because I don't know, a lot of people don't talk about it. I'm a member of this cult, and that's what we stand for. All right. Okay. All right. So we got the Great Compromise here. Okay. Now this is pretty neat. You guys, in the Constitution, they wrote in there that every 10 years we have to do the census. Okay, which is a population count. And that census will determine how many representatives a state has based on their population. Okay, so in 1790 was the first one. And we have these records, guys. So like you can go back and trace your family history back to 1790. You can find your ancestors, if your family's been here that long, in the 1790 census. Okay, of which I can't. Okay, on my dad's side, which is pretty cool. Now, look at the big states here. You got, what's the biggest? We got Pennsylvania here. Virginia has 691,000 people. Okay. Then you got New York with 340, North Carolina 393, Pennsylvania 434, Massachusetts is a big state. Smallest state's probably Delaware here, 59,000 people living there. Okay. So these people are going to be represented in the Senate. Delaware has as many senators as Virginia. Kansas has as many senators as California, which is the most populated state. Really, Wyoming is the least populated state. And they have as many as California. Now, some people say that's not fair. That's not right. Okay? But if you know the history and you understand why they did it, it was to protect states. Guys, we are a republic. We have 50 states. Those states have sovereignty. We get to make our own laws, and for most laws that we live under come from the state, not from the national government. Now, if you guys want to live in a unitary system where all the decisions are made in Washington, D.C. by 535 members of Congress, That's not what the Constitution says. That the states have a say. These two amendments water down the state's power. Okay? All right. And, this is something, we talk about limited government, representative government. Okay? And we, as a nation, have strayed away from that. And what happens? Guys, we're about to hit $30 trillion in debt as a nation. I'm not going to have to pay for that. I'm going to be dead. Okay? But my kids, you guys, your grandkids, your children, they're going to have to pay for that. One way or another. Our government has become irresponsible, fiscally irresponsible. $30 trillion. We're not talking billions here. We're talking trillions. As some would say, at some point the chickens are coming home to roost. Okay, this is not going to end well if we continue this. Okay, if we had not implemented this, there's no way we would be $30 trillion in debt. The states wouldn't let it happen. But the states have no control over we have 2 senators, but we elect them and we don't pay attention to them. Okay. Last thing on here, in order for a law to become a law, a bill would have to pass both houses. Okay. So this $1.9 trillion thing that's going through, we're gonna keep an eye on this, okay? Because it's gonna work its way through the House. Democrats control the House; they're gonna be able to pass it, no question. And then in the Senate, it's 50-50, with Kamala Harris being able to break a tie vote in the Senate. So chances are this thing is gonna pass, okay? But we're gonna follow that through. And eventually, guys, when we get to the legislative branch, we're gonna follow a bill. We're gonna learn all the steps of how a bill becomes a law. Okay, actually, you're going to write an essay on that. 6 steps of how a bill becomes a law. Okay. All right. So now what? We got some other compromises to figure out. Okay, they're not done here. So we're done with the Great Compromise. So on your essay, you're not going to continue here. This is different, okay? Slavery. Again, in 1776, when we wrote the Declaration, we had a chance to do something about slavery. They pushed it back. In 1787, with the new Constitution, they're going to have a chance to do something about slavery. And if you guys remember any American history, like the Civil War, we know we're not going to fix this now either. Okay. So some northern states had already done away with slavery. Massachusetts was, I believe, the first to do away with slavery. Southern states, obviously, guys, needed slavery as an economic tool. Free labor. For the cotton plantations, the tobacco plantations, and so forth. Cotton. Did I say cotton twice? Yeah. Okay. So the southern states wanted them to count as population. Why would the southern states want the slaves to count as population? So they would have more what? Representation in the House. Okay, so the more people you have, the more representatives you have. The Northerners were opposed to that since the slaves were not treated as citizens. They were treated as property. So the Northern states said, no, you're not going to get to count your slaves as population. Now that sounds harsh from the Northern perspective, but it puts pressure on the South, hopefully to say, okay, maybe we'll make them citizens and free them so that we can have more population. But the South's not going to do that. Okay? Guys, in order to adopt this new Constitution, you need 9 states. So the Northerners felt like they had to compromise with the South in order to get 9 votes. And they did. I mean, you wouldn't have gotten 9 votes without a compromise here. Now, again, guys, we can pause and say, okay, these 55 men, many of the 55 in the room at the Constitutional Convention were slave owners. Okay? And the ones in the North that didn't own slaves gave in. And they didn't demand that we do away with slavery. If they demanded that we did away with slavery, would we have written or passed a new Constitution? We would have stayed with the Articles of Confederation, which was not working. The country was falling apart. So it's easy to criticize these founders for this compromise, which is an ugly compromise. But you also have to put it in the context of, if we don't write a new Constitution, this nation is likely to fail. So, you guys remember the name of this compromise? 3/5, yeah. So, each slave would count as 3/5 of a person, or you could say for every 5 slaves, you would count 3 as population. Now, as I said, guys, this is an ugly compromise, because in reality, what you're doing is you're divesting, taking away 2/5 of a human being's humanity. You're divesting them of 2/5 of their humanity, which is awful. To say that you could do that to a human being. Okay? This is going to push this issue back to a later time. 1861. 100 years. 90 years from here. Okay? Actually, 70 years. Okay. Now, one thing they did do that was good on the slavery issue is that they said they would not allow the importation of any new slaves in 1808. Okay, so this is 1787. Okay, so after 1808, they would not allow any importation of new slaves into the country. That does 2 things. It's going to slow the growth of slavery, but it's also going to make those slaves that are here a greater commodity. Now, this is kind of historically kind of an important thing to think about. So the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery, is passed in 1866. Okay, after the Civil War. Okay, so if you were brought into the country in 1808 as a slave, when you received your freedom, you were about 60 years old. Well, we didn't import children slaves, so you would have been a teenager at least to be imported. Okay, so actually you would be in your 70s if you were imported as a slave as 1808. Okay, you would be in your 70s when you received your freedom. Slaves didn't generally live that long. Okay, so, I mean, life expectancy back then was, I mean, it grew as time went on. But chances are in 1866, when we abolished slavery, almost all the slaves that were here were born here, if that makes sense. Okay? This year, I just heard this on the radio this morning talking about life expectancy. We lost 1 year in life expectancy in the United States in 2020. Life expectancy throughout the 20th century had gone up, except for a couple of years during World War II. Okay? 20s, 30s, life expectancy went up. 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, life expectancy up. Okay? We were up to 78.8. We dropped to 77.8 with COVID. Okay? All right. We got some other compromises to talk about, like the presidency tomorrow and the electoral college, so tune in for that. You guys have a good day.